In the 44th verse of the 24th chapter of Luke's Gospel, the risen Jesus is with his disciples, and he tells them, "Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." And then he opened their minds so that they could understand the scriptures. Maybe you can imagine the disciples saying, "Jesus, your name is never mentioned in the Old Testament. How can you say that it was written about you?" But after Jesus opened their minds to understand the scriptures, I guarantee they saw that the whole of the Old Testament points to Jesus and to his death on the cross. Look, for example, at Genesis chapter 22. God has promised a son to Abraham and Sarah, and after a 25-year wait, Isaac is born. But as Isaac grows up, God tests Abraham and tells him this: "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will tell you about." God tells Abraham to take this promised child and to sacrifice him on Mount Moriah. In obedience, Abraham gets up the next day and goes on a 3-day journey with his son and with 2 servants to the mountain, and he tells his servants to stay with the donkeys while he and Isaac go up the mountain, and he tells them that they will come back. He puts the wood on his son's back to carry up the hill, and they head up the mountain. Isaac, obviously confused, asks his father, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" And in reply, Abraham tells him, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." Abraham builds an altar on the mountain. He binds his son on the altar, and he takes out a knife to slay his son. But God stops Abraham, tells him not to harm the boy. He says, "Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looks up, and he sees a ram caught in a thicket which he can sacrifice. And he calls that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day, it says in Genesis, it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." Yes, there are many lessons to be learned in this story about obedience, about being willing to give up anything for God. But the greater story is the son to whom Isaac points and the father to whom Abraham points. You see, Abraham was not the only father who brought his son up a hill to be sacrificed. Isaac carried the wood up the hill to the altar, but Jesus carried the cross up the hill to his death. Abraham brought his one and only son up the mountain, willing to sacrifice him, but God gave Isaac back to him, providing a ram instead, a substitute in his place. But as Jesus made his way up the hill, there was no substitute. Jesus was the lamb that would be slain. And on that hill, God made his son an offering for our sins. God willingly sacrificed his one and only son, who he loved, to save us from our sins. As Abraham displayed his willingness to sacrifice his son, he proved to God that if he could give up his son, he would give up anything for him. This same sentiment is echoed in Paul's words in Romans chapter 8, 31 to 32, where Paul writes, "What then shall we say in response to this? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things?" Why is it that we can trust God to provide, to give us what we need? Because he gave us his son. And so we know that along with him, he will graciously give us all that we need. We can lay down the things that we love, give up anything he asks us to, because we know that he gave up his best for us, and he will take care of our needs. That is what Genesis 22 is all about.